Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Leah Leaves. She is the founder and CEO of Alderon Operations Solutions, where she partners with remote digital agencies to embed expert operations leadership that clarifies team roles, reduces burnout, and enables owners to focus on growth instead of daily firefighting. Now, I wanted to have Leah on because too many agency owners are stuck in operations and it's stalling growth and it's leading to them burning out. And as we have all seen at some point, your growth goals are way harder to hit, to achieve when you can't escape the day to day. In this episode, we discuss getting your team to make confident decisions, building a CEO GPT to scale founder judgment, metrics that show if your ops are truly working, and more. Lead gen is the hardest part of running an agency. For most, it's unpredictable, it's slow, and it's usually expensive. Gia flips that. It's the all-in-one growth platform that turns your existing relationships and client work into a steady pipeline. Gia automates lead gen, follow-up, and content, and it's all from the work you're already doing. You can check it out and get some free bonuses at getgia.ai/dynamic agency. And now, Leah Leaves. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. When an agency owner says, "I am the bottleneck," what does that actually mean for the day-to-day?
So other than feeling like your hair is on fire and you're jumping from Slack message to Slack message, the biggest issue that we see with agency owners still being the bottleneck and what that actually looks like in practice, is that they are still the decision maker for everything. And so it shows up where their team is waiting. And then the owner is like wondering what's going on. Why isn't anyone moving forward? Why hasn't the client been responded to? Why hasn't this campaign been launched? It could be the simplest things that everybody is waiting on because they're so used to the authority coming from the top. And so you're having an incredible slowdown in production. You're having to constantly be in meetings or conversations or Slack messages, answering questions rather than asking them and being curious, and like encouraging people to come up with solutions. And so everything is routing, through the owner, and it shows up in really insidious ways, right? So it's not just the obvious of, oh, this client wasn't responded to, and why didn't somebody do that? It's because, oh, they were waiting to hear back from the owner on how to respond. It can be in other insidious ways that honestly the team is not having that psychological safety to own their roles and do what they were hired to do. And so it's a breakdown in the actual fiber of the agency itself because everything is dependent on the owner. So it feels really intense for the owner, and it feels really uncomfortable for the team. And the people that also get impacted are the clients, of course, because they're always then having to jump back and forth between the team or the owner and then the team. They don't know who to go to for what, and they're just not having clear communication. So it can show up in a lot of ways, but primarily that's where we see it the most, is like the core bottleneck is they are the decision maker ultimately.
So when I was still in the Army, one of the things that I really wanted to push decision-making authority down to the lowest level. And I would often get my soldiers, like the kind of the leaders within my organization, would come to me and say, "Hey, sir, I want to do this. What would you recommend, or how should we do it?" And so I just say, "Well, let's talk through it. What would you do?" And they give me that answer. I'm like, "Cool, do that." And like, it wouldn't give any advice, just go do that. Then they would, and it was fine. And eventually they learned, like, he's just going to tell me to do whatever I'm thinking. And like, they went with that. When I tried using that in the agency space, it did not work as well. And I don't know if it's because of a lack of confidence from the people who are coming in, or like there was something else. But I guess the direct translation there did not work for me. What do you recommend people do in order to get people making decisions?
That's such a great a great analogy to bring up, of what worked, in another environment doesn't work in agencies, because I see the
Mhm.
same actually, that working in, other small remote service-based businesses, and then coming into agency land many a day ago myself, that there were certain things that just didn't click, and I think part of it genuinely is, there is the culture is bred, for a little bit more of this kind of chaotic, fast moving pace. And so people may second guess themselves or question themselves, or may not have literally had enough time in the role before, to feel confident, in even putting forth, an option. And so I rely a lot on frameworks, and systems, that give them just enough of a container, give them just enough of an environment, to point them in, a specific direction, but still
Mhm.
empowers them to bring forth, the potential solution. So a great example of this is the 131 framework from Dan Martell, where
Yep.
you ask the individual, rather than, okay, just like, what would you do? You say, okay, hey, first and foremost, let's state the problem. Like, what is the root issue that you're trying to solve here? And can you get it into like a sentence or less? Because if they can't even do that, you can't ask them for the solution. You can't ask them, to put forth ideas on how to fix it if they don't understand what they're fixing to begin with. So that's the first exercise. Just put it into one problem statement. Then when they can articulate that good enough, and to move forward, then you say, okay, now give me three potential solutions. I want to hear one that may be totally wacky, off the wall, like very, very ambitious, maybe one that's a little more conservative, that you might expect, that I would say myself, or that you would be expected from, and then one that could be something nobody would have ever thought of before, go play with ChatGPT or Claude, and something like that, and
Mhm.
come up with something quirky, or kooky, and then out of those three ideas, this is the bookend to the 131, is now which one would you recommend? So now you still give them the power. You're still empowering them to bring forth their ideas and why they think it's the right fit for this
Mhm.
particular problem. So you can still say, yep, great, go do that. Yeah. But it gives them a bit of a tool to start with so that they're not feeling like they're floundering. They're trying to come up, from something, from nothing, or throwing spaghetti at the wall. Gives
Mhm.
them just enough of that container that they go, oh, okay, here's how I can think through this, and I'm still in charge. I can still make that decision. Ultimately, it's in my hands.
Right. I love that model. And I'd put a calendar event on my Sunday that was just recurring so that, and it had the description of like everything you just said so that a team member, when wanting to book with me, could just copy that description and paste it into their invite. And when I initiated that and said, hey, you have any meeting with me for like a challenge, you got to go through this. Uh, Magically, all of my meetings started to disappear for those. So whether they were actually solving them or they just didn't want the hassle of having to go through that, like it kind of forced people to have to take a little more control. So I thought that was cool.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh, and that's one of the reasons I actually love using tools, like ChatGPT and Claude for brainstorming
mhm,
and for thought partnership, especially, for individuals, that are boots on the ground, because truly, it gives them that opportunity to just think a little bit more clearly. They can
mhm,
articulate things, a bit more concisely when they've had a space, to play it out rather than, oh, I'm sitting in a meeting with my boss and I have to come up with something. It's like
mhm.
they can prep, they can plan, they can have a little fun, be a little bit, bit more of themselves, in that
Right.
space, and then they can come to the table with, okay, I've thought about it. Here's my recommendation. Here's my solution. And then you give them a little boost of what it feels like to also be in a leadership role as well.
Mhm. Wondering too, have you worked with any clients or I guess even internally for yourself, where you've set up like a CEO GPT where it's like has all the thoughts and decision making philosophies of the founder so that the team can just use that instead of going having to book meetings.
Yes, ish. So what we did first was we essentially did all of that where we took everything out of my head and put it onto paper. And
Mhm.
and that's what our actual guidebook is for all of our operations professionals. It's called the Aldera Approach Guidebook. And so it takes all of my thought leadership, it takes all of my concepts, all of my ideas, all of my know-how and how I think through different problems and solutions for agency owners and their teams. And we really productize it into something that the team can then use, for whatever problem that they're handling within an agency, whether it's in HR, finance, recruiting, service delivery, you name it. It covers the whole gamut. And we had this for a while, in different iterations, until we had then more with AI, we created that bot, their approach bot. And so now it still has that same feeling, of you're talking with an experienced CEO and also visionary and integrator combined, so you get all of that know-how, all of that expertise, and you can kind of riff with them, in the bot as well.
Right. Have you found that's been helpful for the team?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Multiple times we've gotten the feedback, that they really appreciated it. And the nice thing about it is that, uh, of course, since we're working with operators, they'll always have some feedback. They'll say, like, oh, this is great. And, here's this other idea of like, I'd love to see this other piece, or it didn't quite give me what I was expecting here. Is that accurate? Yeah. So we definitely got a lot of feedback and have improved it over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things about working with so many operators. You're probably getting ideas just all over the place to like to be able to
24
build this out
7.
even more. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's awesome.
So as you do look at the founder trying to step back from the day to day, what are some of the way like I don't know systems that you should be installing in order to maintain like accountability and ownership with the team so that people are picking stuff up and running with it rather than needing to pull the founder back in the weeds?
Yeah, so it again goes back to a lot of making sure that the team actually knows who's responsible for what, and who can make what type
Mhm.
of decisions. So we go through some basics like an accountability chart. Like, do you have it actually documented of who sits in what seat? And also the responsibilities, what things may overlap from seat to seat. And then how do they interact? So, like a simple decision tree. If a client comes to for example, an accountant or a project manager, and is unhappy, can they make a decision to overservice, that client on their own? Do they have to escalate it to their manager? Do they have to fill out an internal report? Like you could definitely build a lot of systems and processes and SOPs, to support all of that. But at the root of it is what can they decide on their own first? Just give them a really, really clear decision tree of if this,
Mhm.
then that. And then once you have some of those basics defined, then the owner can start actually stepping back slowly but surely. So
Mhm.
we've done this before, and I hate to admit it, but it's true. We've done this before where we've had incidents where we've just ripped agency owners, out of the day to day too quickly, and there's been absolute mutiny from the team, and not because we didn't set up those systems, ahead of time. It was again that psychological safety factor. They were just so used to that person, that owner being there on a day to
Mhm.
day basis that it felt like a void, when they weren't. So we had to systematically go through and say, okay, here's the accountability chart, here's the decision tree, here's what it means. Let's roll it out slowly but surely. Then all of a sudden, you're starting to make the decisions, team members, not the owner, and give them a few practice reps, essentially. And then over a period of a month, 3 months, 6 months, you see that the owner and their calendar in particular, this is one of the biggest tools that any owner can use to know where their time is truly being spent, and are they in the right seat. Is that over that period of time where you're instituting this new culture, essentially, of the team taking ownership, is the owner's calendar starts going from 100% like operations to 30% to
Mhm.
50%, or 50 and then, 30%,
Yeah.
and it goes down, and then it gets filled up with more of the strategic work. So because we want to get the owners, out of the operation seat. Like at the end of the day, they're not bad leaders, they're not bad people, they're just in the wrong seat. So we've got to get them out of those operations, out of the delivery roles, out of finance, out of HR, you name it. We've got to systematically go through and kind of chip away at it. And so by doing so, you can fill in with the right people, with the team members that actually are responsible for those seats.
Right.
So we see, that again, the basics of getting, out of the owner operator, conundrum, that cycle, of despair for a lot
Mhm.
of owners, is by instituting like accountability structure, ownership structure, decision making, matrices, and matrices, and trees, things like that. It goes back to like why I keep saying the basics, but not everybody, sees that as the most straightforward path.
Mhm. And so, like, you can see how it's going to be hard for the team, right? Like that psychological safety is definitely a huge thing. I think what about the founder? Because I know a lot of founders who are like, man, I'd love to get out of the day to day, but then as soon as they start having to relinquish some control, it's like they kind of fall back into their old ways because now they're not feeling good about it. How do you help them with just knowing like, hey, you if you want to grow the business, you're going to have to go focus on other things. So like this is one of the trade offs you have to make right now. Like, how do you get them to feel okay with that? And obviously, the slow roll might be the part of the solution, but like, yeah, what are you doing in that regard?
Well, it's a great point because we call those the reluctant gatekeepers. In particular, we have four agency owner types that we typically work with and that I see time and again. But one of them in particular that we see, especially with smaller remote digital marketing, advertising, creative agencies, is that reluctant gatekeeper where they feel so responsible, for the quality, of service, for the quality of, the production, that even though the systems are there, maybe the team is there as well and like actively working toward that ownership of their roles and responsibilities that the owner can't quite get out of the way. And you're right,
Mhm.
it goes back to that psychological safety for them, because what we find is yes, the slow roll for sure is a part of the solution. Another big part, is, I'll be honest, playing into their bright shiny object syndrome. Is that they have to
Mhm.
have something else that they are excited to do that is not delivery, that is not, operations, because that is what they got stuck in and that's what they know, but it's not actually what started them, in this business in the first place. It's not what really excites them. More often than not, it's getting into more of those marketing seats, the sales seats, it's getting into expansion, and exploring other verticals. It's absolutely giving them the space to explore those bright, shiny objects that I know most operators are going to be groaning, when they listen to this, because they'll be like, oh God, don't tell them to go into the light. It's like, yes, no, we want them absolutely to do that because
Yeah.
it gives the owner, something to focus on, something to thrive with, and to actually help lead the agency, even faster, and with more velocity because that energy that they bring, of being excited about something again, rather than like, oh, I'm bogged down with all of this and I'm just, so heavy with the weight and burden, of this company. It's like the energy flows from the top. It really does. And how you show up matters remotely or
Yeah.
in person or hybrid or like any variation, of the above. And so when they have something that they're working on that they can share with others, and get excited about, that helps bolster the team to be excited about what they're doing as well, and probably bring in other creative ideas. So yeah, definitely take it slow and steady and be
Mhm.
really firm, that like we have deadlines along the way. Nope, you're out of this. Oh, you're out of that. Okay, what are you replacing it with? Right? Because when we look
Right.
at, again, like the owner's calendar and we talk about shifting them out of delivery operations, like all that kind of stuff, if they don't have something to fill it up with again, and genuinely, some of that could just be, are you filling it up with more family time? Are you filling it up with more structure, in your personal life? Are you filling it up with, oh, you have a side hustle that you want to explore that you got really excited about and has nothing to do with the agency world? It could be something not related to the agency, but it has to be something that they are personally invested in and excited about. And yes, even better if it is related to the agency, and they're expanding, services, they're exploring new partnerships, they're starting their own podcast, and getting out there. It's really about finding, what sparks them again, and then giving them that focus, back over there.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities to like when you if you lose someone or you have a breakup, right, filling your time so that you're not just sitting there dwelling on that one thing. It's like otherwise you will just full. I mean, man, all right, probably a terrible example because like I was gonna say, so you don't grieve, like just spend all that time grieving. Grieving is important. Everyone, go talk to your therapist. Like it is. It is important, but you're not necessarily always overwhelmed. So probably a bad example, but I'm going to keep it anyways. The what
No,
besides the calendar?
it
Oh, go ahead.
actually, well, yeah, if I may jump in, it actually
Yep.
it lines up with a rule of thumb, a heuristic that I heard from Leila Hormozy ages ago. That absolutely when something does happen, like let's say you are out of delivery finally, and as an agency owner, like you're sitting there and going, "Oh my god, what do I do with myself?" Even if you have something scheduled out, and but you're still sitting in the realization that you're
Mm-hmm.
not what is holding the agency together anymore. You're not the sole individual that everybody's relying on. And like that can be really scary and really freeing at the same time. And so this
Mm-hmm.
heuristic is, to take 24 hours. Give yourself that 24 hours, let yourself sob about it, let yourself, grieve about it, let yourself, feel like, oh man, they don't need me anymore, and what am I going to do with myself? And pull your hair out, do whatever you need to do for 24 hours. Then your 24 hours are up. Great, move on. Okay, you got things scheduled, and so yeah, still give yourself that time to grieve. Naturally you are shedding an old identity, as this individual that everybody relies on to, oh, now you are this leader, that everybody
Mm-hmm.
aspires, to work with. So yeah, definitely agree though. Like take that time, but give yourself, a container for it, give yourself a
Yeah.
time limit, and then yeah, move on.
Yeah. That was one of the as I was working through like different messaging things for my own business. I wanted to highlight that like I want agencies to be able to generate their own leads without agency owner heroics. But in talking to a couple agency owners, I realized like they didn't say this, but like they liked being the hero,
Mm.
right? Like there's like ego attached to like being the one that when you can come in and save the day and everybody's gonna praise you and they're so happy you're there. And so yeah, that is a hard thing to kind of shift from when handing all of that off. And so this
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. Honestly, it's the same for operators. I mean, we talk all about getting the owner out of operations, but then you also have to look at the operator that is sitting in that seat, and make sure that they're not doing the same thing to themselves, because then
right.
you're building the same bottleneck, you're building the same fault point in the
Mm-hmm.
agency, which is a detriment, to any agency that wants to actually grow and scale. So
Yep.
we really make sure that like our operations professionals are doing what's best for the agency, like what's best for the business, not what's best for themselves. Right? Like they have to be focused
Yeah.
holistically on what are the systems and strategies, that are going to make this scalable, not what is going to put me in the limelight. So yeah, anybody that sits in that seat, you got to be really careful with that.
That guilty of that when running an agency.
Same.
Yeah. Which one of my current company values is no martyrs, no kings, where we're not going to be sacrificing ourselves for the sake of anything. Like we work together to accomplish the mission, and then the like anyone can have an idea. There is no king who's ruling from the top saying this is everything that has to happen. It's someone has an idea, you can run with it. Let's go.
I love
But
that.
shifted that mindset a bit. But I
Mhm.
want to go back to the calendar piece of this. So like so that is one way to know that the founder is actually stepping out of this of the day to day and everything. But like, are there other metrics I guess that you're looking for?
Yeah, another big one. It honestly is client delivery is consistent. So you are on track, with timelines, deadlines, budgets, you name it. So it is working like clockwork. You can have flexibility, within the scope. You can have flexibility within the engagements, and there's always going to be edge cases, like what happens, in client delivery. But honestly, if 80-90% of it is consistent, like boom, done. Like you're running a solid, scalable agency, that can continue to grow. So that's a really big one as well. So you've got the owner's calendar, you've got client delivery, and then you've also got stable margins, right? So I'm talking about like gross profit margin, net profit margin. I'm even talking about like not just margins, but when you're looking at your P&L, like looking at your revenue, that you don't have these massive spikes, or dips, that things are over time. Let's say like you're looking at like, I'd say a quarterly, basis, like a 90-day, rolling, basis, that it's fairly average, or it's fairly consistent in its growth trajectory. Or honestly, for some agencies in 2025, I hate to say it, but that it is consistently declining, as well, rather than cratering, but there is in some level of consistency when you start to look at, at a slightly wider lens, of the agency. But having that stability and that consistency, in your numbers, is so crucial to show that what you've been building, is actually sustainable and working and is going to be then scalable as well. If you've got really, really big spikes or you've got really, really big dips, yeah, and this is something that I see a lot of agency owners do that I want to flag is they will say, "Oh, but it was because of this. Oh, but it was because of that," and they explain it away. I don't care. I do not care what happened that 1 month. That is a red flag that you've got to double down on fixing whatever that issue, was at the root of, to make a solution for, because that is going to cause massive, massive stress, in the business, not just for the owner. I mean, the owner is going to feel it probably 100 times, more than any of the team members because they're looking at those numbers, constantly. But again, that energetic frequency, that the owner carries of those spikes and the dips, that filters out to the rest of the team. So if you've got stable margins, if you've got consistent client delivery, and you've got a solid, stable calendar, for the owner as well, that is more in strategy than it is, in ops, then those are some of the top metrics that we look for. Like we have a whole scorecard system, that we work on, with every agency, to identify their most important, categories of leading and lagging, indicators. And we narrow it down as much as we humanly possible. Like we have a few that we're always looking across all of them, but we give them some flexibility on what's special to them. But we make sure that we are tracking, things like, again, client delivery. We're tracking, the owner's time, even that they may not like that, but it's true because it signals a lot of the health of the company, and then those margins. And if everybody
Right.
was looking at their margins over a 30, 60, 90, day period rather than just the day to day, right? Not just like the, oh, I'm jumping into the bank account and seeing what's going in, what's coming out. It's, oh, actually, I'm looking holistically at the business, and oh, we are consistently growing. Or, ooh, okay, we're plateauing, and what do we need to fix, in, our sales pipeline, our marketing engine, to improve that, so it gives you more of that clarity of what to work on next.
Right. So when you are like as a fractional ops partner, you're going into an organization for the first time. What are those other metrics that you're looking at just to even know where to start?
Yeah. So of course we are looking at like net profit margin, gross profit margin. Those are two of the biggest. We're again, kind of reiterate some of the same things, but looking at like the
Mhm.
consistent delivery,
Yeah.
because I know that people want to look at capacity planning and forecasting and you really have to have some other fundamentals first. Like you have to have, for example, like time tracking before you can really double down on, what does resource management and capacity planning look like? So we look at, basics, like, are we hitting our deadlines? Yes or no? Like
Mm.
that's a black or white. It's a very easy indicator to see like, are you in the green or are you in the red? There's no ambivalence there.
Mhm.
Whereas there can be a lot of explanation with all of these other numbers. But we're looking for a lot of as much as we possibly can, we're looking at more of those leading indicators, of the activities that the team can own as well. So how many touch points, do they have with the client? Rather than while we do look for things like CSAT, client satisfaction score, or net promoter score, of course, those are really important as well. Those are still lagging. So we need to front load a lot of the scorecards with some of the leading indicators like activity based trackers. So what can we control ourselves, like touch points, with the client, like making sure that we are also, from a financial perspective, how much are you putting in your vault every month? How much are you saving? How much
Mhm.
are you investing, back into the company? Not just, oh, what is that net profit margin at the end of the month? Or for most, people, you're not getting those numbers reconciled until the middle of next month. So you're constantly behind the eight ball, with those numbers. That's why we say like zoom out a little bit with some of those lagging. But the leading, we want to look at again what activities can we really lean into, for
Mhm.
each individual role, in each individual department.
And then what's the 80/20 of those? Like if you had to pick the few things to fix that would have the most impact for everything else, where would you start?
So what I would be looking for, um, I think it's really important for agencies to know their revenue goals. And I think that is important because that draws them forward, and gives them something big
Mhm.
to look forward to. Um, but equal and opposite is their net profit. So this is looking at the P&L, at the top and the bottom. So you want to look at your revenue, because you can control more of the activities that impact, your revenue number. Um,
Mhm.
for example, in your marketing and your sales efforts. So revenue is a big one. Obviously, net profit margin is the second biggest one. The other one that I would say every agency needs to know off the top of their head, honestly, is their client retention and churn rate.
Yep.
And this is so critical because I can't tell you how many agency owners that we've worked with that have this feeling that something isn't going right, and this feeling, that they are losing clients. And when they look at the data, it paints a very different picture. We have some agencies that have a 95% retention rate, which is
Mm.
insane. I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing such an amazing job. The quality is through the roof, and they're constantly improving and gaining, more clients, to add to that mix. We have others, that they have stepped so far, away from their scorecards, and metrics, and their data component, of their business is really lacking. And so they feel like, oh yeah, I trust my team. I trust, that things are going well. And then
Mhm.
you look at the data, and they have a 60% retention rate, and they're not,
Mhm.
gaining as many clients as they need to replace, let alone actually grow. So the retention and churn rates are incredibly, incredibly insightful for every agency owner to know, and very easy to track, honestly.
Mhm.
This is a very black or white kind of number that you can look at as well. The other one, similarly, that we like to look at is the team retention rate and churn rate,
Mhm.
because this is very impactful for agency owners that, again, have more of the feelings, based decision making frameworks, where they're just like, oh, the sky is falling, the world is crumbling, because I had one person leave, and it's well, one person over 3 years, when your other, eight people, have stayed with you, like, let's keep this in perspective, versus, others where we've worked with agency owners. I can't even tell you the churn rate, of their team members, because it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. It was so high, and it was so upsetting, because they were just they were enforcing this like churn and burn mentality within their own team, let alone within their own client base as well. And so this can indicate a incredible area for improvement, if you have a high churn rate, with your team, or turnover, as most people call it, but we just say churn as well, keep it simple. But yeah, turnover, churn rate, for your team, because it signals, bigger issues, in the market, for your agency. So those are four that we're often looking at. So you've got revenue, net profit margin, client retention, client churn, and then your team churn and retention rate as well.
The team retention is one that doesn't come up that often, like in conversations. But I'd read a stat at one point that like agencies have on average a 30% team churn rate, and I needed to look up more of the sources because that felt very high. But I've also talked to some agencies that were higher than that, and it was just very surprising. But the like I've had clients who that was a critical piece of the engagement was them saying like we don't want to get traded off to multiple marketers. So like find whoever's going to have the most longevity with your business and like we just want to work with them.
Yeah.
And so like they had
Mhm.
obviously had an experience where that was that came up
Yeah.
multiple times.
Yeah, and I think once some of those numbers as well, and then you can benchmark them, against
Mhm.
other agencies. You can benchmark them, against, past performance, for your own agency as well. Start getting the trends, then you kind of know where you sit. Then I know I talked about again, like all kind of lagging, indicators again of that performance. But these really inform your leading, because one issue that we've seen, with a lot of agency owners, especially when they're trying to, build out, like activities, based, performance metrics, is that it's throwing spaghetti at the wall. They're just coming up with stuff of like, oh, it sounds good, but if you don't know the root issue that you're solving for, then you don't know what solution, is actually going to work. So identifying, those four numbers, and having those for every agency as the starting point, then you can build off of them to fill in the rest of that scorecard with the leading indicators that are going to impact directly those lagging
Mhm.
indicators.
Yeah.
I
So,
feel like I just went down like an operator rabbit hole
oh,
of like
yeah,
indicators. Yeah.
yeah. I've got one more question for you before we get into like the
Mhm.
final couple. The what looking at 2026, what do you think is the biggest potential mistake that agencies could make in regards to their operations?
It will always come back to me. The number one issue that I've seen for years and that continues to be the issue is that they are still sitting in the operations seat. The owner is still trying to solve problems that they inherently have created themselves, not because they're bad people, not because they're bad leaders, but because it's not the right seat for them. So we still see this, and this comes to the table even with AI, on the forefront, right? Where we see the owners trying to solve, problems, with AI operations, that they just don't have the context or the capacity for, because again, it's just not the right seat for them. So
Mhm.
they may be the AI visionary for their company, and hold that seat in addition to being the owner, being, the CEO, any other seats that they might be in as well. We still see some agency owners in like the chief strategy officer seat because they still like to play in the client strategy. So, but the actual operations seat, for AI operations, for internal operations, for finance, for HR, for recruiting, for admin, for delivery operations, you name it, they should not be in that seat, period.
Mhm. All right. Last two questions. First one, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
Have a whole shelf just for agency owners that I recommend. But the one that I come back to time and again, that
Mhm.
really reflects, again, my stance on finding the right people for the right seats, is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
Mhm.
Really
Yep.
identifying, where your strengths are. I mean, there's all kinds of books out there, like Who Not How, is another great one. The book Who, itself, is another one that reflects, on this of once you find your zone of genius, and your strengths that you can play off of, for the better of the company, lean into that, and build the systems, delegate to the right other individuals, for all those other seats,
Mhm.
including the operations. So the buy Back Your Time has a lot of really practical guidance on how to do that, as well as why it's so important to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good book for this year. Last question is that where can people find you?
The main place people can find me is on LinkedIn. So I'm always on LinkedIn, like 24/7. So definitely hit me up with a direct message, reach out, comment, post, with me. Always happy to have a conversation, off of LinkedIn. You can also find the company, Alderon Operation Solutions. You can find us at our website, alderonenterprise.com. And then other places you can find me are other podcasts. I have a whole playlist on Spotify, of other podcasts that I've been on as well.
Awesome. We can get that linked up in the show notes as well. But well, Leah, as always, great chatting. So
Likewise, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for letting me in kind of go down that operations rabbit hole for agencies.
yeah, no, I'm glad you did. This is good. That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.